Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the new Phase 4 loot, and we're going to be going over ZG and the new world bosses. And there's not a ton of stuff in ZG, but there are some really good items and stuff to keep an eye out for. So I guess we'll start with the enchants. The enchants are really good. They're both going to be the best available enchant. So your shoulders, you're going to get 30 attack power, and previously you could only put like resistances and defensives on your shoulders, so this is going to be a really nice enchant for your shoulders. And then the 28 attack power on your head and legs, this is going to be better than the 8 agility. So pretty nice upgrades for your enchants there. Now in terms of the actual items in ZG, the single most important item for a rogue is going to be Rentaki's Charm of Trickery. If you do any sort of PvP, any dueling, anything, this is going to be an insane trinket, and mini Thistle Tea every 3 minutes. It's super fun and just really important. Really nice to not have to worry about the gold every time you're using a Thistle Tea, because they get pretty expensive, and just to be able to do it every 3 minutes, it's just really nice. So huge trinket. After that, there's some other items. There's nothing in ZG that is going to be best in slot for your character. So besides like enchants and then potentially like the Rentaki Charm of Trickery for PvP, there's nothing in ZG that's best in slot. But there are some items that are going to be really good while you are waiting for the raid item that you want to drop, basically. So to start with, we have the Blood Wrench foot pads. Now these are actually really good boots, and in terms of just pure stats, they're the second best pair of boots in the game right now, behind Boots of Shadow Flame, and they're going to be better than Bloodfang boots and Night Slayer boots. And the only reason why you wouldn't want to use the Blood Wrench foot pads is, like I said, if you have Shadow Flame or if you have the full set bonus for the 8 set of Bloodfang. But other than that, you're actually going to be using the Blood Wrench foot pads. So even if you're like a sword rogue working on your full 8 set, it is going to be better for you to use these boots until you complete the set. After that, we have the Warblade of Hikari in the offhand. This is like a worse version of Brutality Blade. It does less DPS and it has worse stats, but it has faster speed, so you get more sword spec procs and more poison procs. But overall, it is just a great offhand if you do not yet have a Brutality Blade or a Maladath, and it will be an upgrade over Mira's Song for certain. Now after that, we have the Fang of the Faceless. This is another great weapon. This is worse than Perdition Blade and Dragon Fang Blade, but it is an upgrade over Gut Gore Ripper and Lobotomizer. So this is a really good dagger, 1.9 speed, great stats, just because of its lower DPS compared to Dragon Fang Blade and Perdition. You're just going to end up doing less weapon damage and lower DPS. So the last thing I'll mention is the Zandalari Hero Medallion. This is a mention for PvP or like really short fights. This is something you potentially could swap in, and I still want to see how good this item is. This is more of a fun item for PvP and potentially having a lot of burst, specifically with like daggers if you attack fast. But this is more like a fun, unique item. And keep in mind that this item is going to be hard to get because casters, there's a really good trinket that they get from the last boss in ZG from the shared quest item. And so this is going to be kind of hard to get, but at some point maybe pick it up, give it a try, and I think it'll be a really cool, fun trinket in PvP and a very unique item. Onto the raid level gear. So these are pieces of gear that are very good, and they're actually of the quality of raid level gear, but none of these pieces are actually best in slot. So the Zandalari Madcap Mantle is like barely worse than the Night Slayer shoulder pads. So if you don't have those yet, you can pick up the Mantle. The chest is barely worse than Night Slayer chest, although significantly worse than Bloodfang. The belt is actually not too far off of Night Slayer belt. The eye patch is again not too far off the tier 1 and tier 2 head. The neck itself is a decent bit off of a Nixie Tooth pendant, and this is a pretty easy neck to get, but if you still don't have it yet, you can pick up the Eye of Hakar. And then the bracers are significantly worse than Night Slayer, or significantly worse than Bloodfang, but not that much different than Night Slayer. but also significantly worse than the Bracers the Eclipse from Dire Maul West, keep in mind. But the reason I put these here, and the one thing that might change depending on your gear, is you'll notice these set bonuses on the Zandalari items. So the shoulders, the chest, and the wrists. So despite these items actually being worse than both like tier 2 and tier 1 across the board, well, except the shoulders, if you get the 2 set bonus, it can actually be better in certain situations. So pretty much, if you don't have a Bloodfang chest piece yet, it's going to be worth it for you to use 2 pieces of Zandalari for the set bonus across your chest and your shoulders. If for whatever reason you don't have the Bracers of the Eclipse and you don't have the Bloodfang Bracers, you can also use like the Madcap Mantle with the Bracers. But keep in mind, the shoulder is the piece that you would want to always be using if you're doing a 2 set, because it's barely worse than Night Slayer. So if you don't have the absolute bis for rating yet, you can definitely line up some Zandalari pieces for that 2 set for the 20 attack power, and it's going to be worth using. Now finally we get on to down to, this is kind of the last batch of items that are somewhat usable. These are going to be the pre-raid bis level items. So you have these rings. The rings, you need both of them to be better than existing pre-raid bis, like the Tarnished Elven Ring. But if you do get both, they are good. You just will replace them once you have the really good rings like Band of Ikuria and the Nefarian Head ring. So these are not going to last you, and you really just need one really good ring for them to no longer be worth using. But if you don't have any good rings yet, you could pick up both, and they would be pre-raid best in slot. Then we have the Gurubashi Dwarf Destroyer. This just has 30 attack power. It's pretty good. It's going to be like better than anything you can get in pre-raid bis, barely. So just keep an eye out for that. It's pretty good stats, but worse than anything you can get from worse than Striker's Mark, basically. Then you've got the Zulian Tiger Hide Cloak. Now, this cloak is actually pretty good. It's about as good as the Cape of the Black Baron in terms of damage, but in certain situations, it could be nice to have the hit, and it also gives you extra stamina. So this is a great alternative to Cloak of the Black Baron if you don't have it yet, and it's going to give you about the same damage as that, and similar damage to Cloak of the Fire Maul as well. There's also the Zulian Slicer. Now, the Zulian Slicer is kind of an interesting weapon. It's a little too fast for a main hand, and it doesn't have that great of stats for an offhand, and it's a little too slow for an offhand. But all in all, it's going to be like about as good as like a Crawl Blade or a Sword of Zeal, but it's not going to be better than, for example, using Dao Ren's. And then we've got some fun weapons here. This fist weapon hits pretty hard, so if you don't have Dao Ren's, it's probably going to be about as good as a pre-raid sword. But keep in mind, this is way too fast, and this is more of a fun item. So if you don't have very good weapons, I mean, you could go for Thakal's Grasp and Arlok's Grasp for fun if you want, but keep in mind the offhand is bad because it has really low DPS and no stats. And like I said, the main hand's really fast. So these are more fun weapons that aren't really that terrible compared to like pre-raid items, but really not a lot going on here. Likewise, we have the Warblade of Hikari. This is just way too fast. I can't see this being better than a Crawl Blade or a Sword of Zeal, but it is going to give you the sword skill. It is, if you have the set bonus, and it does have really good stats, but it's just not. I guess you can give it a go if you want, but your Sinister Strikes and your Sword Spec procs are not going to be doing much damage. And then on to just some bad items. Just to clarify, like, these items suck. They're worse than Devil Sore. Really no reason to use these Blood Wrench grips, but they are leather agility items. So there's a few PvP items. None of these are really like crazy good, but the Might of the Tribe has a lot of stamina on it, and so it's a pretty good option. You also have the Seal of the Gurubashi Berserker. This is a lot of attack power. This is a pretty strong ring. You have the Zandalarian Master Talisman. Now, you can get the full set bonus if you wanted of this thing. I would only recommend doing this in PvP if you have you don't have tier 1, because I think the 10 energy is going to be much better than like reducing the cost of Eviscerate by 5. But you can reduce the cooldown of Kick by 0.5 if you want. This thing's really not that good though. And then you have the Hunting Bow. This is going to be like better than a lot of pre-raid bis stuff in PvP, but again, nothing exciting. And I just mentioned these items all suck. They're all items that could, I guess, be used by a rogue, but they all pretty much suck. So don't worry about these. On to the world boss loot. Now the world boss loot has a really, really good weapon. You have the Nightmare Blade. Now Nightmare Blade is going to be, if you compare it to Viscag, the actual stats from the attack power are going to make it so it does more damage than Viscag, but it is lower DPS and it is a slower weapon, which helps its case. But all in all, it's going to be about as good as a Viscag. So I would value it such. And if you don't have a Viscag yet, this is a great main hand if you can manage to get the world boss down. You also have a pretty decent dagger. This is worse than the ZG dagger as well. It's like an upgrade to like Lobotomizer or Gut Gore Ripper, but nothing too amazing there. But if you don't have any of the great raid daggers yet, it'll be good. You also have the Dark Heart Pants. These aren't very good, but if you don't have any of the raid pieces, the problem is Devil Sword is really strong too. So I guess if you had really good raid gloves and you didn't have tier 1 or tier 2 legs, you could use these, but in most situations you'll just use Devil Sword. So these aren't very good, but not too far off of raid level gear. And then you have the Circlet of Restless Dreams. Now this thing is pretty much terrible unless you don't have Aged Core Leather gloves. It's just too much stamina for raiding, and dagger skill's useless in PvP. So this is kind of a weirdly itemized item. But I mean, if you don't have Aged Core Leather gloves yet, it is going to be good. Lastly, we've got some PvP items. Just a ring with high agi, high stam. It's pretty good. You got the Dragonheart necklace. This has just a ton of stamina. Don't worry about like the intellect and spirit on this thing. The stamina and the attack power make it still a good option for a rogue in PvP, particularly if you don't need the hit from the Onyxia neck. You also have just a ranged weapon that has a lot of stamina, and good attack power. So this is a decent PvP stat stick if you wish. There's some garbage wrists, and don't get these. They're useless unless you want 4 of a resistance for some reason. And then lastly, there's some nature resistance gear. If you're preparing for AQ, I guess you could start picking up some nature resistance, but the tanks I'm sure are going to want some of this as well. But that's pretty much it for the new items added, and thanks for watching.